Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for This Week in Google is provided by Cachefly. CACHEFLY.com. This is Twig, This Week in Google, episode 130, recorded January 18th, 2012, the day the internet went dark. This Week in Google is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to create a high-quality website or blog. For a free trial and 30% off your new account for 3 months, go to Squarespace.com and use the offer code TWIG1. It's time for Twig, This Week in Google. And it's going to be a good show, I can tell you. Let's start by saying hello to our panelist, Gina Trapani from smarterware.org, back from the White House. Hi, Gina.
Yes, I am. Hi, how are you?
Great. You got to tell us all about it, okay?
Yes, I will.
All right. Also here, Jeff Jarvis, journalism professor from the City University of New York and the author of Public Parts, his newest book. Good to see you,
and
Jeff.
With my hair, I'm always appearing in black and white. So.
You know, you look good in black and white, actually. Also, Matt Cutts is here from Google, one of Google's earliest employees. He works in the spam fighting division at Google, and a good person to have on today. Hello, Matt.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining
Besides
us.
turning off the logo, do they turn off your lights, Matt?
Yeah,
it's a dark day today.
Yes. That's fine. Those of you who are just tuning in or downloading the video might be slapping your computer or your television set. No, there's nothing wrong with your set. We are in black and white today because we're recording this on January 18th, which is the day the internet fought back, and with some success, I might add. We just talked to an activist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation that today alone, 29 members of Congress have reversed their position on the internet. I'm Kevin Purdy, and I thank you for joining. Thank you.
I wasn't quite done yet here. I just rolled with it.
I like the black and white, actually. I think that looks kind of good.
Yeah.
There's something about it.
Classy.
So if you go to google.com, there's a nice big, it looks like a piece of duct tape over the logo, and a link. Tell Congress, please don't censor the web. And look at this, nearly 4 million people today signing that petition. Let me just do that right now so that I can make it 4,000,001, and I encourage everybody, while you're watching the show, to do that. Matt Cutts, why doesn't Google want to stop piracy? Are you pro-piracy, Matt Cutts?
Of course not. No, we hate piracy, and we actually spend, like $60 million a year trying to get bad ads and other things out of our system. So nobody wants piracy, but it's pretty crazy when you're trying to solve a business model problem with a technological solution that just won't even work. And I think that's one of the big things, is people don't realize that pirates will just quickly get around this. And in the meantime, it will absolutely, of course, hurt jobs, but basically put a chilling effect on the internet, where a lot of people, a lot of sites that rely on user-generated content will be incredibly affected by it. My wife, I sent her an email, and I was like, hey, would you mind calling a senator? And she's like, oh, yeah, I should. And then she went to CraftZine, which is an O'Reilly site, and it was shut down for the day. And she's like, oh, no, that's right. Regular sites are going to be affected. And that was the tipping point for her to call her senator.
Yeah, I care a lot about this. Our news program, Tech News Today, I mean, we get pulled down from YouTube all the time. Our news program, Tech News Today, ran that mega upload or megadownload.com video, even though that video itself was not an infringing video, but the Universal Music Group decided it was. Universal Music Group also asked Tech News Today to be pulled down. We appealed it. They pulled it down again. We appealed it again. Finally, it was put back up on YouTube. It's funny, Matt, because you do work for the company that owns YouTube, and YouTube has, in many cases, been hand in glove with the music and the recording and the motion picture industry.
Well, what's interesting to me is I went to D.C. last year and did a Q&A, and it was just for staffers. And most places, if you say, ask me anything about Google, they'll say, how does Google work? How do I rank higher? How do I get my word out to constituents? And I was pretty shocked at how many questions were about YouTube and DMCA and copyright infringement.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Wow.
Yeah. And what I realized is a lot of people have this conception that YouTube is still this you know, like it was in the very early days where you could find all these shows. And Google has done a very good job of trying to make sure that, you know, if you're the copyright owner, you can make sure that copies are down, or you can, you know, monetize it. You've got a lot of different options. So we've worked hard. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. Like with TNT, it's totally the case that you sometimes see overly broad takedowns. You can see mistaken takedowns. You can see takedowns that end up almost looking capricious because it turns out the person didn't have the copyright. We've seen all kinds of fake DMCA requests where people are just trying to hurt either competitors or trying to basically do some prank or something like that. So the notion that this process won't be abused when we already see it abused under DMCA is just crazy.
Yeah, I guess that's the point of that. One of the points of that video that we just aired, and we didn't air it on. I'll tell you what. I'll play it at the end of Twig so you can see it. But it explains why SOPA is bad. And one of the things the video points out is, well, there's a lot of things the video points out, but one of the things the video points out is that there are laws like DMCA and Pro-IP that are already in place. There are anti-counterfeiting laws that are more than adequate and have problems already. We don't need to go a step farther. Tim O'Reilly, we're trying to get Tim on. He's in a plane, and when he makes his connection, we're trying to get him on by phone. But he's been really great on Google+. A lot of posts on Google+. But one of the posts he put up a couple of days ago that I thought was great, before solving a problem, make sure you've got the right problem. He talks about unfortunately, the people who framed this debate often frame it around, is it about piracy? But in fact, he says, really, that's a misframed argument. The losses due to piracy are far outweighed by the benefits of the internet, by the free flow of information. History shows us again and again, frontiers are lawless places, but as they get richer and more settled, they join in the rule of law. American publishing, listen carefully, American publishing, now the largest publishing industry in the world, began with piracy. Began by stealing others' works. He says we've got to reframe this conversation. Piracy isn't the problem. And even if you thought it was, these bills won't make a difference because pirates just go ahead and go around anything like this.
Just earlier this month, where digital sales are now, you know, higher than physical sales of music, and early on, you definitely saw a sort of antagonism towards digital sales by a lot of people in the content industry, and you know,
just as they hated VCRs, cassettes, MP3 players. Freaking piano player rolls.
Yep.
At the turn of the last century, they tried to stop. Player pianos, they're going to put the music industry out of business.
Leo, I think one of the things that Tim makes that he of all people can make this argument because he is a publisher, he sees the benefits, is that we haven't proven the harm here.
Exactly.
How many of those, and it's proving a negative, how many of those people who did pirate the work would have bought it had they not pirated it? Probably very few. How many people instead, however, did discover the work because it was pirated? Could be very high. And Paulo Coelho, the author, I wrote about this in the last book, he has sold more than 100 million books, yet he pirates his own works.
Right.
Because he discovered that when he put up, when people did pirate his works in other languages like Russian before the book was out, his sales in those countries went up. And he pirated his own works, and his publisher caught him. Jane Friedman caught him because he said, "Oh no, somebody pirated it," and it turned out it was the
He put it up on Pirate Bay. Paulo Coelho did it himself.
Yeah, and it was the wrong version. But he said, "Okay, you caught me, but let's look at the business opportunities here." And Paulo yelled at me. I was giving away books at an event, and he said, "Don't give away books, sell books." So he's very much a salesman, very much believes in it, but he sees the benefit of things being spread in this way. And I think it's the lack of harm, too. And I'm going to start the drinking game early, but you go back to Tim's point about early publishing and Gutenberg. This notion of owning intellectual property is fairly recent in history. Yeah. And I think that what's happening, too, is we're going through a phase in society where we're going back to the idea that I just wrote about David Weinberger's magnificent new book, Too Big to Know, and knowledge becomes the network. It doesn't become the property of individuals in it. And that's our old model, and that's the way we used to do this. And I think that this is really about trying to rethink the shape of our world, and that's why the institutions are having such trouble with this. That's why the Rupert Murdochs are belching everywhere.
Look at this tweet from MC Hammer. He says, "Stop SOPA," and there is Hammer with two guys from Firefox standing in front of the Capitol building. I love it.
Nice.
He says, "Need we say more?" So even artists, I think not all artists, but many artists understand that the internet has given them far more opportunities than it has taken away from them. And you say an interesting thing, Jeff, and Tim O'Reilly says this as well. We often conflate the way the argument's misshapen is we conflate intellectual property with real property, and we think that steal my phone, that's real property, but steal my idea is not real property and is not protected in the Constitution or by the founders never intended to protect intellectual property. In fact, they said very clearly that the copyright laws and the patent laws were designed to protect the inventor for a limited time, a very limited time, just 14 years, and that ultimately that intellectual property was the property of society and belonged to society to promote the arts and sciences. And so this whole idea that somehow something is like, that it's real property that's being stolen, even that is fallacious. And
especially in a digital era.
Especially in a digital era.
And not only because it's not a consumable anymore, but also because the models change. And I go through this all the time, but in media, we've been brought up to think that all the value is encased in the product. That's why we sell it. And I've said this, I think, on the show before, but Mark Zuckerberg realizes differently. Content has value, but its value is to get people to generate signals about themselves. Why the hell do you think Google invented Google Plus? Because why is it in Android? Because we're using these things to generate signals about ourselves that allow those services to give us more targeted and relevant content, services, and advertising, and extract more value from their relationships with us. So content does have value, but it's only one value in a chain. And the way media was structured for the 550 years of Gutenberg's era was that content, media were encased as a product and could be sold that way. That's just over. So what we're seeing is more than just old companies trying to protect their copyrights. We're seeing right here two important things happening. One is the utter shift of a business model around media. But second, and I'm very, very happy about this, I'm very proud of our internet, we're seeing the beginnings of, I think for the first time, the creation of a public called the net.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very exciting that this is the first political movement that I believe has started out of the net for the net's concerns, and it's up to this point working. It hasn't won, but it's impressive in what the people of the net can do. So let's remember this, folks, and let's keep fighting for other principles.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, what's going on today is just absolutely historical. What I was going to say earlier, though, I mean, I think that we need to be realistic, though, and accept that we're never going to convince the MPAA and the RIA that piracy is not a problem. So while I agree with you guys, I just think that, they're spending a lot of money convincing the powers that be that piracy is a problem, and this is why we need legislation this way. So what we need to do as a tech community is to educate the government about how the internet works with as much effort and time and human hours as they're spending, educating them about how much piracy is a problem. I was at the White House last Monday, which is the reason why I missed the show. I was invited there for a meeting about an event that's happening in the spring, which I'll talk about then. But after the meeting, I had a few moments to speak with Anish Chopra, who's the CTO of the United States. And we were talking about, how does government reach out to its constituents and engage with citizens online? And Anish said, what's the issue of the moment? And I said, absolutely SOPA.
Yay.
And I used, I very strongly advised him that the administration has to put a statement out there.
And they did 3 days later. Thank you, Gina.
And he gave a hat tip. What I was very proud of, Gina, he gave the hat tip to you and Twitter, which was really so cool.
He did. Well, I told him that I would boost his follower count by mentioning him on Twitter, which I did, and then said, oh, hey, hours, you're welcome. And he said, okay. And then he, when the White House responded.
Gina, say that again because we broke up a little bit. We lost you.
Oh, sorry about that. I had mentioned on him on Twitter saying that the tech community should follow him.
Good.
And I think kind of in return he gave me that hat tip for the White House's response. But the White House was working on that response when I was at the White House, so I certainly don't take credit for that.
What's his Twitter handle? I want to follow him.
Anish Chopra.
Okay.
Anish Chopra is his name, and his Twitter handle is just his name.
A-N-I-S-H?
A-N-E-E-S-H.
C-H-O-P-R-A. All right, I'll follow him right there. There we go. Chief Technology Officer. So, follow. There you go. See? But I do think that this makes an important point, and Read Write Web, Scott Fulton writing in Read Write Web also makes this point. All right, so we've shown we can be negative Nellies and say, don't pass it. But then the challenge is, okay, come up with a solution.
Right. I mean,
but what's the problem, though, Leo?
Well, I agree with you. And that says Neela, and you go back to TWiT about a month ago, Neela Patel and I had a big debate over this. And Neela, who is a lawyer by training, said, you can't just say no. You have to offer a compromise position. My position was, digital technologies, there is no technology that effectively prevents piracy. The solution is to reinvent your business model,
yes,
not to break the internet and computers. And I do believe that the people who control content today wish computers and the internet would just go away. The reason we chose to go black and white today instead of black entirely is I wanted to harken back to the 50s, where there was no internet. There was no computer. And, of course, at that time, those guys hated other things. There were other technologies they hated. But they would love computers and the internet to go away. And failing that, they know that's not going to happen. Let's modify them in such a way that we don't have to fear them, instead of reinventing their business model. There's plenty of money to be made.
But the problem as they perceive it is that there's piracy going on foreign websites, and the United States needs a way to address that.
Well, is there a way, though?
I don't know. I don't have a better way. I mean, this bill. I mean, this is an attempt to give the United States a way to address. There's foreign website, non-U.S. website offering copyrighted material, which is illegal, and how do we address that? This is not the solution. But what is the solution? I mean, when I brought this up with Anish, she said to me, "Do you know why this bill even started? It's because we need a way to address, criminal activity on foreign websites, and it is. Listen." Offering copyrighted material is a crime right now, right? So what is this?
Well, Gina, hold on there. It's not what happens in China is not a crime in the U.S. It's a crime in China if China has the right laws.
And in fact, it's not a crime in China. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, so that's what this is trying to do, is to fill in laws and enforcement in lands where it doesn't exist. But we don't have, unless we want to do some extradition and well, we've done things like that.
We've got no way of stopping the Chinese, so we'll do what the Chinese did, which is create a great firewall of the United States.
Right,
and I agree with Leo here that
this.
Go ahead. Sorry, Gina.
No, I was going to say, obviously, that's a terrible idea, right? But that's what this Read Write Web article is saying, that the administration is saying, like, okay, if this is a terrible idea, then what can we do?
Here's the idea. Leo is absolutely right, I think, and you start to encourage and teach industries new models. Now, will various of those companies succeed? Not necessarily. The thing that I've been harking about, and I think I've just decided today that we're going to try to build a demo of this at CUNY, is to build embeddable units of content. So I'm going to come back to Google Plus and Richard Gingras and folks and try to get a Guardian article, let's say, off their API, embedded not only in my blog, but also on Google Plus, with their brand, with their revenue, with their analytics, with links. You change the model. A movie that passes around, maybe it should pass around with advertising in it. And if you want the clean version, you buy it. Otherwise, you get some monetization with it. I don't know. But trying to preserve the old model in a new reality is not the solution, and it is a misstatement. This is where Tim Riley is really so right. It's a complete misstatement of the problem. There's not a proof of harm here. So before we get demanded by the White House or Read Write Web that, well, okay, then you come up with something better. No, absolutely not. You come up and show us the harm. You show us the real facts that make it worthwhile to ruin the friggin' internet. It's not.
Well, and it's interesting because I try to think about how to step into the minds of the people who are facing these problems, because I understand if you're a movie producer or someone who writes music, you don't want pirated content to take away from your living, right? So there's two different cases. There's collateral damage, really legit businesses that could be taken down by mistaken sort of practices, and then there's the egregious sort of stuff. And on the egregious sort of stuff, my spam fighting instinct kicks in a little bit. So to be a good spammer, you need reputation, like links, you need content, something that the search engine can key off of, but most importantly, you need a way to monetize. And there's been a study where people looked at email spam, and they basically figured out that most of the credit card processing went through something like 3 banks based in Eastern Europe. And so a lot of the times, if you actually follow the money to either the credit card processors or the other payment processors, you'll find that there's some very small points where you could actually have a big impact there. And so there is an act called Open where people are talking about following the money.
Yeah, but Matt, Matt, how well has that worked in stopping email spam?
The interesting thing on email spam is I think Gmail has been a huge technological improvement over what was previously working with email spam.
Because you're filtering it, not because you're stopping it.
Because we're
95% of all traffic on the internet is still spam.
Yeah, but for an average user, they don't have to see spam in their inbox.
Well, but that's my point. There are technological solutions, but you cannot stop piracy. You cannot stop spam. If black holes, if blacklists worked, like they're proposing in SOPA and PIPA, we wouldn't have any spam. They don't work.
Oh, I'm totally familiar with that.
Yeah,
right?
we haven't stopped spam. We just don't see it.
Right. Well, and what's interesting is the very first thing I worked on at Google was Safe Search, which is our family filter. And there was a Dilbert that came out that basically said, so you're going to try to keep every 14-year-old boy from getting to porn? Did you know that a snowball lasts longer in hell if you put a little hat on it? And so you can't keep people who really are going to go to, they'll go all over to find stuff. But you can try to make it easier so that people don't run across it on a daily basis. But what doesn't work, because I've seen, how the brittle aspect of blacklists dealing with trying to mark explicit porn sites and not, the idea of outsourcing that through a private right of action to other companies who aren't necessarily as tech savvy, that just seems like a recipe for disaster.
Somebody in the chat room is saying, well, what about physical goods? What about Chanel handbags and Rolex watches? I would submit that anybody who would buy a fake Chanel handbag or Rolex wristwatch would not buy the original under any circumstances anyway. So what you cannot say is that Rolex loses money to fake Rolex wristwatches.
No, and in fact, Leo, I went to a meeting by Richemont in South Africa last year, and they talked about what they're going to offer. Is the danger there really is that someone thinks they're buying a real one and get ripped off. Okay. And that a phony gets passed off. So what they see the need to do is to create new verification mechanisms so before you buy it, you can verify that this is real.
But that's not the overseas website problem, because if you're buying Chanel handbags from an overseas website,
no, you're right. Well, you should just know better, and you're right, Leo. You're not going to buy it. You're not going to buy a real one anyway. Right. Here's another way to look at it. There were more cases today. Zappos we're looking at so many things the wrong way, and I wish I'd been on with Steve before this to ask him this question. Slightly off topic, but all the security breaches, and oh my God, people have my credit card number and my address and my social security number. Shouldn't we set up transactional methods so that it doesn't matter if anybody has my credit card, my social security number, or whatever? Right? We're doing it this wrong way. We're trying to play the whack-a-mole that Matt's talking about, of getting rid of the bad guys rather than creating new and better systems and models. If we had some means that was biometric and informational that let me and only me do transactions under my name, then I wouldn't care if anybody has my social security number. It's not the secret to my universe. We're doing it the wrong way. So same here. I think that Matt's quite right, is to try to stop that thing from happening isn't going to work. So you create better systems that bring the good stuff up, make it easier to buy things. Steve Jobs proved that worked in music. Is the revenue the same? Is the monopoly pricing the same? Well, no, but welcome to a new world.
Everybody have a chance to speak along to these lines. Matt, you have anything else you want to say before we move along? I think we're preaching to the converted here.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's watching this show knows exactly why they hate SOPA.
But it is very cool when you were talking to the EFF guy to hear that 29 Congress people have reversed their position today. That's pretty wild.
And as you say, this is much larger than PIPA and SOPA. This is, I think you could look. We'll be able to look back on this day and say this is the day the internet showed its power. And we, the people of the internet, maybe do have a little bit of clout. And we're not just a bunch of, neck-bearded guys in their underwear sitting in their basements.
Plus, one thing that made me very happy about the discussion, the White House statement, was that it rose to the level of principle. And that's what I talk about in my book, is the need for discussion of principles. Because we get down in the nitty-gritty of trying to recreate an old model or protect one little thing, we've got to deal with the full principles, the precedents that occur here, and the why and the wherefore. And at some point, the White House has to decide, and Congress has to decide, is it more important to protect an entertainment company or free speech? And where are they going to put their capital and effort in doing this? And we have to have this discussion at the level of principles and protecting these principles for a future. And that's what I'm so delighted about, is that we're having here. Is we're saying that SOPA is one of many bad things going on in trying to screw up the internet, but this is the one where it went too far, and this is the one we're going to stop, and we're going to have this discussion on the basis of principles.
And I hope this strengthens our muscle.
Yes.
And our protest muscle, and now that we understand that we have some say in the matter, that we all stay involved and active, we vote, we pay attention to these issues. But now, I think it's really important that we have a balance, a dissenting viewpoint. So, ladies and gentlemen, we take you to Rupert Murdoch, who says, "So Obama has thrown in his lot with Silicon Valley paymasters who threaten all software creators with piracy. Plain,
Can you do that with an Australian accent too, please?
yeah, plain thievery. Piracy leader is Google, who streams movies free, sells advertisements around them. No wonder pouring millions into lobbying." So, as you point out in this is from Jeff's blog post, saying Rupert Murdoch doesn't understand links.
He really doesn't.
It's all your fault, Matt Cutts. I blame you. I don't know what to say about this.
He thinks to link to things is to steal them rather than sending them audience. He does not understand that basic structure. So he's always thought that aggregators were content kleptomaniacs, in the words of one of his recently ousted lieutenants. And now he thinks that for Google to just link to bad stuff is Google doing it. And he thinks the whole internet is owned by Google. I saw
here's the smoking gun post. "I've just been to Google search for Mission Impossible. Wow! Several sites offering free links. I rest my case."
Jeff Bercovici says that happened at CES when he got a demo of Google TV and was shown how to search for TV. And he asked, if I search for Mission Impossible, will these bad things come up too? And the answer was, well, yeah, search. And he went berserk. He says in his latest post 19 hours ago, "Don't care about people not buying movies, programs, or newspapers, just stealing them."
I'm sorry? So if we don't buy anything from him ever again, he doesn't care about that.
No problem.
No problem. Just don't steal.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that there is some internal consistency to that, because the presumption being that if once stolen, that was a purchase that we've lost.
But he accuses Google of being the thief.
Right. You stole it instead of buying it. Oh, it says, AFL-CIO supports SOPA. Well, we better talk to those union leaders. How about that? I have to say, though, I don't want to make too much fun of Rupert, because at least he's tweeting. I mean, this is him, obviously. And how many CEOs, only a guy like Rupert Murdoch with huge amounts of power within his company would get the permission to tweet.
He doesn't ask permission.
He just does.
Yeah, he gives it.
Yeah. I'm going to say what I want. All right, but now it's Matt's turn to get on the hot seat. And we're going to do that in just a little bit, because Google made some big changes. I don't know, Matt, if you saw TWiT this week, but we went into great detail with Danny Sullivan about this Search Plus My World and some of the real interesting conflict of interest issues that it raises. And I'm going to give you every chance to respond to that. So we'll do that in just a little bit. This is, of course, the day the internet fought back. That's why we're in black and white. We invite you to go to blackout.eff.org or americancensorship.org or reddit.com or one of wordpress.com or wired.com and learn more, wikipedia.org, and learn more about this and what you can do, primarily, chief of which is call your member of Congress. Now, of course, we're a global show. More than a third of our audience is outside the U.S. Don't think this doesn't affect you. These laws are being passed all over the world, most recently Spain, France, the World Intellectual Property Organization, the running dog of the U.S. content industry, is working on passing bills exactly like this all over the world. So the fight goes on everywhere. You're just as much at risk as we are. So please do find out what it is that you need to do to make a difference in your neck of the woods. We're going to take a break and come back with more of Gina Trapani, Jeff Jarvis, Matt Cutts. But first, a word from Squarespace. I wonder, I didn't look at Squarespace. I wonder if they're participating in this. Squarespace would be one of many sites that would be absolutely threatened by it. No, they're not. Because all it takes is one infringing site on Squarespace, on a Squarespace.com server. Oh, yeah, there it is. There's the black bar across the name. Stop censorship right there. All it would take is one infringing site at Squarespace.com. The whole domain could be gone. So that's why we've got to fight this fight for everybody. Squarespace is web hosting the best out there, in addition to the best content management software, to give you a place for your website. You could try it free right now. Go to squarespace.com, click the green Try It Free button, and no credit card required. You just fill out the name of the site, a password, and an email address. You can set up a site. You've got 2 weeks to use every feature of Squarespace. Their iOS and Android software, tablet too. It's so great. Allows you to post, manage comments, get stats, import and export from all the major blog APIs, Movable Type, WordPress, TypePad, and Blogger. Complete social integration for Twitter, Foursquare, Facebook, LinkedIn, Flickr. Just with, very simple. Drop a little widget in there, sliders, point and click. You can completely customize it to fit your site's look. Templates that are not templated. They are professionally designer-created templates, more than 60 of them. But that's just a starting point. And then you make it yours. You could even use CSS and JavaScript. You could do e-commerce. I just love Squarespace. I want you to try it free for 14 days. Click that green button. If you decide to buy, this is the only thing I ask of you. Use our offer code when you decide to buy. It's worth your while. 30% off for the first 3 months of your site when you do so. TWIG1 is the number. TWIG, the number 1. But that's only when you're ready to buy. You don't even need that, just to try it and see how you like it. Squarespace.com, the secret behind exceptional websites. 30% off for your first 3 months when you use the offer code TWIG and the number 1. Any site aggregator would be vulnerable to this bill, and of course we'd be very vulnerable. I mean, I'm not implying that I don't have a stake in this. I have a huge stake in this because every show we do, including this show, frequently we run clips because we're a news show, and its fair use allows us to do so. Clips that illustrate the news stories we're talking about, and often content creators pull those shows off of YouTube. But and I think that that's a reasonable DMCA takedown. I'm content with that because there's an appeal process. To me, that works. Doesn't work perfectly, as Matt was saying, but it's more than adequate to protect. In fact, sometimes way more than adequate to protect rights holders. We don't need to go any further. If we did, it would take merely a complaint from the Universal Music Group to pull all of TWiT off the air.
Yep.
And that's the kind of thing we're worried about. Take me down off YouTube. I can live with that. We'll fight it and we'll appeal it, and there is an appeal process. But there's no appeal if ICE decides that TWiT is an infringing site and pulls us off the air. By the way, Chris Dodd, former Senator Chris Dodd, who is now a spokesperson, actually he's the CEO and chairman of the Motion Picture Association of America, was just on CNN. Time Warner's CNN, saying, SOPA is to protect jobs in Hollywood. I think far more jobs have been created by internet broadcasters we've created 2 dozen jobs here.
Amen. Amen.
Yep.
Those are jobs that'd be lost. So SOPA costs me jobs, Chris Dodd. What about that?
Well, Leo, I just see that Trevor Timm, who you had on, just a few minutes ago,
From the EFF.
on Twitter from the EFF, Twitter says that he quotes Patrick Ruffini of saying that 26 of the 29 legislators who just announced opposition to PIPA and SOPA are Republicans. And he says the National Review reframes the legislation as a, quote, bailout for Hollywood,
Thank
which
you.
he says explains the sudden Republican opposition.
All he had to say is the word bailout.
Bailout. Isn't that beautiful?
That's why Tim's right. Tim O'Reilly's right when he says if you reframe this, it's really it's merely a misunderstanding of the problem that's causing this.
Yes.
It's true. I love that. Bailout for Hollywood is brilliant.
Yeah.
And so you have Orrin Hatch, who was one of the, according to Trevor here, who was one of the co-sponsors, has now removed his co-sponsorship.
Thank you.
So
We're
the
working on
Republican Party-
Dianne Feinstein. Our
Yeah,
senator
hello, Democrats. Hello, Democrats.
Well, what's interesting-
Feinstein, Schumer, Gillibrand, come on.
Feinstein, also one of the sponsors, is a senator from California, so she represents both industries, right?
Yes.
Silicon Valley and Hollywood. So we're just going to exert a little more. Google's in Washington, D.C., right, Matt? I mean, you have an active lobbying.
Oh,
arm.
yes.
We are in Washington, D.C., yeah, absolutely. But it's a case where the longer you've been in D.C., the longer you have relationships. And Google, as a young company,
Right.
doesn't have as many relationships.
You need to hire more senators. I'm sorry, did I say that? All right, so let's talk about Search Plus My World. Did you get a chance to see TWiT last Sunday with Danny Sullivan? You've probably seen Danny's complaints.
We talked to Danny yesterday, in fact. And it's really interesting to me because there's a lot of great stuff in Search Plus Your World where really useful things can show up. You know, if I follow Gina, which I do, and she talks about a router, and I do a search for router, it surfaces her opinion about what are the good routers, what are the routers to avoid. And I actually had that happen to me this past weekend. And I think Danny and other people had some very reasonable feedback about, well, we wanted to see more Twitter or we wanted to see more Facebook. And, Facebook, they have a deal with Bing. They have a deal with Yandex in Russia. They even have a deal with Bleko. They've talked to Baidu. But we haven't been able to arrive on a deal together. And even Twitter, we had started out with a product called real-time search, which was hugely useful, that relied on Twitter a lot. And unfortunately, that arrangement ended up rather abruptly. I don't know all the details. I know that a lot of engineers were working on the July 4th weekend this past summer to turn that off. And so I think when we were building Search Plus Your World, you want to have a good user experience. You want to have sharing that just works, and identity that just works. And as an engineer, you're probably a little bit reluctant to build something if you don't know whether, that other company is just going to say, oh, I'm putting in a robots.txt. I'm blocking Google from crawling me entirely.
So you could, it's true. We know that Google can see a lot of what's on Facebook. A lot of that's public. A lot of it's searchable. But you just can't count on it, is what you're saying.
Certainly with Twitter, given the experience of real-time search where that did end rather abruptly, it was interesting. I have a ton of respect for AMAC, the general counsel for Twitter. He's worked at Google, and he's a fantastic guy. But it's hard to predict whether someone's going to say, well, how dare you not use Twitter more from the open web data versus, oh, we don't want to be in it at all. And so I think we started out with a relatively safe assumption, but definitely if people want to talk about ways to work together, that's something that we could have that conversation.
Something odd has happened here. I have to say, I was able to demonstrate on my Twitter, on my Google account. I had Search Plus My World. It seems to have been turned off now. I don't know why I am no longer getting those results on the right-hand side. I'll give you an example of a search that we did do, and you are seeing some of what we're complaining about right here. I searched for Mark Zuckerberg. Right in the drop-down, I see Mark Zuckerberg's Google Plus account, pointing to a Google property, and for a while it was the first search result. It's changed now.
No, it's first for me.
Yeah, something happened. I think that, I hate to say it, Matt, but somebody at Google has flipped a switch on my account.
Try doing a search like Linux and see whether that brings up.
Well, you know what was another good search? Let's see what happens is music. Here we go. This is doing it now, so let's do that. Let's show this one. So first of all, the point Danny made was that Mark Zuckerberg's Google Plus page is probably not a good search result because he hasn't posted anything on it. Yes, it's a Google property, but it is not a good result. And this is precisely his complaint, which is that you are now massaging search results to benefit Google, not to give the best search result.
Well, I think if you look at that page, it says people and places on Google Plus. So I think it's in its own box. It's on the right-hand side, and it very specifically says it's on Google Plus.
Didn't do it for Mark Zuckerberg. It actually gave it to me in a drop-down and as a first search result. But
right, yeah. I think the suggestions are, again, people that we know about because we actually know their identity. There's a very common case if you're married with someone, and suppose you get a divorce. On Facebook, you might have those permissions updated instantly. But if you're crawling the web, you might not get that connection that these people are no longer linked, and maybe it's really bad to show pictures of your ex or something like that.
Got it.
So unless we really have the sort of access where we can tell, at a given moment, does someone have access to this picture or something like that, then it's really tricky to be able to handle that well.
Music is another example, and as you say, this is people and pages. It says people and pages on Google Plus. What happened, of course, is if you search for Lady Gaga, she wasn't on Google Plus. She must have listened to our TWiT episode because she is on Google Plus now. And there's good reason to be. If you look over here after I search on music, I get Britney Spears and Snoop Dogg, both of whom are in 1 million plus circles on Google Plus. Those are right there related to music. There may not be the best search results for me. Lady Gaga's not there, but as Lady Gaga obviously recognized, boy, you better have a Google Plus account. Is that not strong-arming Lady Gaga into having a Google Plus account by modifying your search results?
Which she just started.
Right. She capitulated. You won.
Well, again, this is not my area. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a regular web spam engineer, but I don't think that the law requires us to do things that help competitors, just competition. Something that helps. Showing these results is better than not having any information at all. I like the search in Linux because it actually has Linus Torvalds, Linux, and Greg Coe-Hartman, who's a kernel hacker. And it actually surfaces really useful experts that you wouldn't have seen before.
Yes,
so
but if Linus wasn't on Google Plus, it would not have.
No, absolutely. But the problem is, we've got clear marking. We've said this is people and places, or people and pages on Google Plus.
And at the bottom, learn how you could appear here too.
Sure, but it is on the right-hand side and it's in a different box. But I think the key thing for us is we already tried to build a product, for example, that would surface Twitter data and had a contract, and that had to end really quickly, and a lot of people had to work really hard to pull data out. And so I think if you are an engineer and you're trying to figure out, if you're just going to build a system and then a year and a half later or 2 years later have to shut it down, in some cases uncleanly or very quickly, then you'd be a little reluctant, to build that the next time around. It's sort of like once bitten, twice shy.
So really the call at this point, and I presume somebody at Google's made this call, is to Twitter and Facebook saying, let's make a deal so that you can show up here too, because truthfully, it would be much better for the search results if you did.
And that's above my pay grade.
I understand.
I'm a mouse among the elephants.
And Matt, I believe me, I know I'm spanking you here, and I'm only spanking you in surrogate. I love you, Matt, and we love Google, but I have to say, a number of people said this on the net. This was the day Google went evil.
So that's one thing that I disagree with. Like Danny had published a post that talked about when some of the things were pushing relevancy, not as strongly because it was Google Plus. But what I've noticed is your searches can change entirely. If you do a search like photos, you can get the latest photos you've taken and the latest photos that your friends have taken. I find myself doing, for example, I went to Costa Rica about a week or two ago, and if I do the search Costa Rica, now I get colleagues at Google who have been to Costa Rica and have that picture, and now I can find out from them which things I should be doing. So, the notion that you should be able to search over the sorts of things you've seen in the past, you don't remember where you saw it, but you know that you can get really interesting, useful stuff distilled down, and more importantly, searches you wouldn't have done before. Like, it's a different type of search that lets you find out new information that you wouldn't have found via your friends. I've had several of those epiphany moments where I'm like, oh, wow, that's, a recommendation from Gina is worth 10 times as much in my mind than just a regular web page. And I've had several of those kinds of
No, and I
moments,
agree with you. In fact, this is what we've been talking about quite a bit for the last 2 years, is how social search massages search results and makes them more relevant. And it was clear that one of the reasons Google started Google Plus is so that they could, own some signals, these very, very valuable social signals. And you're right, you can't rely on Facebook. You can't rely on Twitter for those social signals. So I understand the engineer's point of view, which is, well, we're going to have to create our own social signals. We recognize that these social signals are absolutely critical to making search better. So what how do you, as an engineer, how do you solve that? Well, let's start capturing social signals, Google Plus. But what it looks like to the outside world is a favoritism towards Google Plus. I think you've responded well, Gina and Jeff.
Gina, you go first because you've been silent for a while. Then, of course, I'll jump in.
So I have mixed feelings about Search Plus World. I think that it makes my search results both better and worse. So I just read the Hunger Games series. So I do a search for the Hunger Games, and I can see all the places where my friends have mentioned the Hunger Games. Costa Rica example, valuable. And because I happen to be participate a lot of the network, and my friends participate a lot of the network, and Google knows graph is very, very useful. So that I like. What makes me uncomfortable is like this past week or the last couple of days, I did a search for, I wanted to look at Leo's blog because I knew he had done a post about whether or not we should black out today. So I searched for Leo Laporte, and the first result is his Google Plus profile because he's in my circles. But that's not what I'm looking for.
Actually, it was. That's where I posted that.
But you did an audio post.
I did.
LOL.
You're right. The audio post is on the blog. No, you're right.
Right. So I didn't remember leoville.com off the
Right,
top. So that's what I was
right.
looking for. And I thought, I follow Leo. If I wanted his Google Plus profile, I would have looked for
Right.
him on Google Plus. I would have known to do that. Truthfully, this made me uncomfortable. I have to say, I've been on Twitter since 2007. I've invested way more time on Twitter than I have in Google Plus, right? Just because it's been around a lot longer. So Twitter has a lot more information about me than Google Plus does at this point. So I feel like, my Twitter profile, and even to some extent my Facebook profile, should rank higher than Google Plus at this point. And I understand the issues with making deals with those companies and all those things. I felt kind of disappointed because I think that the best way for a community to grow and for a social product to grow is from the inside and not from the outside. Like, it made me sad that people are going to join Google Plus as part of their SEO strategy, because they've been, because they feel like it will raise their ranking because of Search Plus
Lady
World.
Gaga.
Right, exactly. Rather than join Google Plus because it's a great product. I actually think that Google Plus is a good product, but I don't think it's proven itself yet. So this feels like the right path, but to me it felt a little too much too soon. I didn't love that it's the default setting. I didn't love that even if you toggle to disable personalized search, it goes back to the default setting unless you settings and say don't. So it made me uncomfortable. It felt a little bit like a misstep, even though, as Matt said, I have had the experience. It did enhance my search results in some cases where, I value the things that my friends say more than random dude on the internet webpage. So that's my mixed review.
No, and I think that's absolutely fair feedback. And one thing that some people didn't realize in the very first wave is, even though we need to know who you are and able to surface your content or your friends, if you link from your Google Plus profile to your Twitter account or Quora or Friendfeed or WordPress or Typepad, that data can also be surfaced. So it's not only Google Plus content. But the other thing that I'd mention, and I totally agree, it can be useful if you search for sunset. I expect to see Danny Sullivan's pictures of sunset. But there's a good story from when we first rolled out PDF or Acrobat search. Because PDFs are really long, they had a lot more words and they had a lot more matches. And at first, when we started to blend them, people complained you have way too many Acrobat files showing up in the search results. And so I think we'll absolutely iterate because we totally know that if we annoy people, like Matt Honan did a post where he said he's going to set his default homepage to Bing, we know there's no lock-in in search. You can leave in 15 seconds. And so if we annoy people, we know that they'll start to leave. And so it's in our enlightened self-interest to try to get the balance right and not to try to, show you so much of any given thing that it annoys you. So the goal is to show you those results only if they're really useful, not if there's something that's going to be annoying to you. And it might take time to find exactly what that balance is going to be. But I do think that we'll find that balance, and in 2 or 3 years, people will look back and say, I'm really glad that I've got this kind of functionality where something that's private or accessible only to me, I don't have to remember where it was. I can go and I can search for it in one place.
And by the way, as Danny pointed out on TWiT on Sunday, Bing's been doing this for a long time, so going to Bing is actually does not fix anything.
Leo, I agree with you that there's an issue here, but the issue is not that Google is pointing to itself. The New York Times does not point to the New York Post sports section, which happens to be better than the New York Times sports section, I'm told. Right? It points to its own stuff.
Well, I hear that argument, but that's a publisher. And so this is my really fundamental problem. Is Google a search engine or a content creator? You can't have it both ways.
Well, no, I disagree. I think that it is a service provider, and it can point to its own services. It can point to Gmail, and it can point to other things. It can use its space. That's what companies do. But here's where I'll agree with you. I think that Google's reputation depends upon it having and then enforcing and living principles. And so if I were Google, I would have done a few things. One, I think I've been a little less garish about the pointing to Google+. Two, I would have made a very clear policy statement that says as soon as we can, I take your point, Matt, reliably get feeds from Twitter and Facebook, we will include them equally because those are social signals that are equally important to you. And if they're more important in terms of your social graph, then we'll put them there. I think Google should make that kind of statement of where it's going. But I also think that Google made some right moves. One, as Gina said, going toward collecting social signals is important. And two, it got praise even from privacy people on its transparency about where it gets what it gets. I think they deserve some of that. I think a lot of the problem here is a design and aesthetic problem because it's a little bit tacky.
and that's good feedback. I think there's still absolutely room to improve the UI. If you have two results, maybe it's better to have one result and that's a little more compact. We tend to go for lots of information in the given pixels that we have. But what's interesting to me is, I love Twitter. I post on Twitter all the time. And yet some of these services, they're almost like private forums in that you expect it's your data and you can pull it out and you can take it wherever you want. But if the service can restrict how well we can crawl or block us entirely or something like that, then it's not as much your data as you think it is, which is a little bit of a strange
I've been
situation.
Very vocal in my criticism of both Twitter and Facebook because they are essentially silos based on our content. And that isn't the way it should be either. And so I am sympathetic, actually, to Google's conundrum. I'm sure you'd love, let me not put words in your mouth. Would you love to include Twitter and Facebook results in this social search?
I can only speak for me personally, but absolutely. I mean, I've tweeted something like 15,000 times. I would.
That's really a lot of signal. There's a lot of signal stored in Twitter, which in theory you own, but in fact you do not. Twitter owns, and Twitter restricts.
Or ThinkUp app or something like that. Yeah.
I was with some guys from the Google Plus team when I went out to do my book talk in Mountain View, and I'm not revealing anything from behind any curtains, but they were clearly disappointed that they no longer had Twitter live search. And these were not business people; these were product people, who were creating the product that we're using. But more data is only good; is only going to provide better services. So I think if Google had been more clever, this is where Google has a problem with both Washington and Silicon Valley, and they've got to watch this out, especially in Europe, I think. Is they should have turned around and said, we're about to release this amazing new thing. We wish it included Twitter. Why don't you go ask Twitter to let us do that? And it would have turned the focus on Twitter instead of the focus being on Google, seeming as if it were, advantaging its monopoly, which it doesn't really have.
Well,
go
ahead.
That's a fantastic point. I completely agree. And one thing that's been a little interesting is whenever we rolled out real-time search, I found a post by Andy Beard, who's a guy who's not always happy towards Google. And he basically said, I hate real-time search. It shows up all the time. It's on by default. The UI is garish. I don't want to surface, all this sort of Twitter information in my search results. And yet, a couple of years later when we turned it off, people were like, oh, no, real-time search is fantastic. How will I know that Michael Jackson died or whatever? Right. And so I do think that there's a really nice vision if we can deliver on it of something that's useful and not just the public web, but distilling, opinions of your friends or stuff that only you have access to. If we can deliver on that, I think people will really love it. But we have to get the UI right. We have to get the balance right. Ideally, we can, work with other people to try to surface that information from wherever it happens on the web.
Clarify this for me. Did Twitter pull the plug on that relationship?
My understanding is that Google did put out a statement that said that. And Google normally tries to be a very polite company.
Right.
So the fact that we would even go that far means there's a little bit of this, left at the altar, once bitten, twice shy kind of feeling going on. But that's my understanding.
And I think, you made such a good point, which we had not heard before, which is you don't build a service based on something that could be pulled so easily. People are saying, well, they can search Facebook. You can today, but we've seen Facebook do this. They did it to Apple with Ping. They said, yeah, we got a relationship until we don't. And it's very embarrassing for a company like Apple to put out Ping with Google, with a Facebook integration, which they announced, and then not to have it. So I can understand why, as an engineer, you're not going to build something on that. You don't want to have the Twitter debacle happen again.
Right. It's not even like it was a hypothetical. We had seen it happen 6 months ago on the July 4th weekend of 2011. And so to have it happen once, it's definitely once bitten, twice shy, I think.
Gina, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
Someone in the chat room made an interesting point, which is that it would be nice if users could opt in to having their Twitter data crawled. And an easy way to do that would be to open up the Google Plus API to make it right. So I could say, hey, anytime I post to Twitter or Facebook, also post this to Google Plus. But that has not happened yet, and I understand the reasoning behind that. You don't want Google Plus to just be this, echo chamber for what goes on in other networks. But that would, I would love that. I would love to be able to have Google search capabilities across all my networks, and it might be, giving the users a little more power to do that versus making complicated deals with these companies. Of course, not everyone's going to opt to do that, but a publisher like all of us sitting here who spent a lot of time putting things online probably would opt into something like that.
Right. And I don't, and again, I'm just speaking for myself personally. I would love that. We have seen with Buzz where if there wasn't as much activity and then you had the API, then Buzz would just become things that were syndicated from the other services where you posted. But even if it were something where you could upload your own data, so that Search Plus Your World, wherever it was, maybe it was an XML feed, I think that would be fantastic. We've seen stuff like Facebook with their version of data liberation we'll give you the lists of the names of your friends, but no profile pages or anything. So it's unclear.
Don't you dare import them into Google Plus.
Yeah, it's unclear how much data you'd be able to pry loose for different services, but I personally would think that would be fantastic.
We're waiting. Tim O'Reilly, I think, is going to join us. We are going to wrap very soon. Tim, are you there? Tim is in between flights, and so we're going to try to get him via phone.
He was getting his headphones.
He's getting his headphones from the airport. Is that what that sound was? That was feedback from Tim O'Reilly?
Feedback from Tim, so I asked him to get headphones.
And then we're going to wrap up. If you're just tuning in and you're saying, why are they in black and white? Or if you're watching one of the downloads and you've been banging on your TV for the last hour, we're in black and white because today is January 18th, the day the Internet sat up and started fighting for itself. And like many other sites, we considered pulling ourselves, going black. And I decided that this would be a good compromise. Black and white, the banner on the lower left that says visit AmericanCensorship.org. But I think we have a duty to pass along information.
I'm really glad you made this decision, Leo. I think it's the right decision. And an email beforehand, Gina, and you and I are in this. Lauren Weinstein did some really great posts on Google+, arguing all for protesting SOPA, but saying that and I'll put it in my words, that if you're going to tell the world that you're vital, then you shouldn't cut yourself off. And he made a post using the word hospital in place of Wikipedia and said, well, we're very important, but we really have some problems, and you're going to be okay for 24 hours. Go somewhere else.
That's not a good idea. On the other hand, I commend Wikipedia because I think
do too. I think
that was the single biggest stroke, and I think they did the right thing.
They did, but you didn't have to do the exact same thing. I think you're talking about the issue. You're giving ammunition to the folks who rose up as a public of the Internet, and I think that's important.
If you go to boingboing.net, you'll see 503 service intentionally unavailable. This is they really went dark, but of course nobody died from lack of boing boing. But we are going to have two of the editors of Boing Boing. Corey couldn't join us because it's so late at night in Great Britain. But we are, Mark Frauenfelder will join us for Triangulation tonight, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll spend an hour talking about this issue. We're still waiting to hear from Tim O'Reilly. I really wanted to get Tim on because he's been so eloquent.
We were just having a little technical.
Just having some technical issues because he is, in fact, at the airport. And it was very gracious of him to make some time in between flights. And
in the meantime, can I just say that I'm going to use this as a litmus test to see what is the most savvy magazine, because there really ought to be a magazine that puts Alexis Ohanian, co-founder of Reddit, on the front cover and says, this is the new face of politics.
I agree.
Yeah, good point,
Yes.
Matt.
He was really one of the lightning rods. I mean, Wikipedia had a huge amount of momentum by deciding to go completely dark, but it seems like Alexis kind of narrowed down the day and really was one of the first to say we're going to go 100% dark. And Reddit is building a platform for changing politics as well. And even before that's built, he's personally won over a lot of Congress people. Like, I really want to see what magazine ends up doing that profile, because somebody needs to.
I agree. I think that it probably will go unnoticed, but truthfully, this is a significant step forward in politics and in the internet and the power of geeks, the political power of geeks, people who understand the issues, who care about the issues, and are willing to stand up and be counted. This is a huge day, and I think that's we absolutely had to recognize it, and I just wanted to find a way to recognize it that would allow us to have these great conversations. Matt, I want to thank you. Matt Cutts works at Google, keeping the Google search results spam-free, and I'll tell you what, without Matt, I don't know. We really are grateful to the work you do. We really appreciate it. We also thank you for taking some of the heat by proxy. And I think you did it, as always, and this is why Google is always great to have you on, and why Google, I'm sure, loves having you speak. You did a great job defending the Search Plus Your World. Thank you, Matt. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
One of the great guys in the world.
We love Matt.
We love Matt Cutts. And we love having him on. And I love having these kinds of great conversations about the whole thing. We're still waiting to hear from Tim O'Reilly. Do you want to, I don't know if we had planned a tip and a number and a tool of the week, but we could do that. Gina, if you've got a tip of the week.
Gosh, it seems such a heavy
Seems
discussion.
so trivial, doesn't it?
Trivial.
I know what your tip is. Call your Congress critter.
It is. I mean, that really is the tip of today. I just have to say, again, it really is amazing to see the internet become this amazing platform for democracy, and I want to see more action. I want the web to kind of have this API to these big institutions to change them and to stop legislation like this. I want to see more of this in the future, and we will have more of this in the future, because I think Clay Shirky pointed out in his TED Talk that SOPA is just the next iteration of the DMCA. So there are going to be others in the future. But back to my trivial tip, which seems kind of trivial. I had picked up this site, notificationcontrol.com. We all kind of get a little too much email. A lot of it is, what they call bacon or notifications from different social networks. This site, Notification Control, just has it's basically just a list of links to various services, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, YouTube, Foursquare, where you can control that exact page, set what notification email.
I like that.
Email, and you don't want to set up the filters in your mail account. You can just go do a quick audit, very similar to my tip a couple weeks ago to my permissions. Just do a quick audit of what's sending you what, for what reason, what kind of notifications. Are you getting notification every time someone mentions you, or if someone DMs you, that kind of thing. And the second part of this is a shameless plug. My app for Android, To-Do.Text Touch, has been ported to iOS, so it's available now for the iPhone and the iPad. And I hope you'll check it out. If you go to todotxt.com, you'll see it for iOS.
Excellent.
And it syncs to Dropbox, and it's 100% nerdware, proudly nerdware. So I hope you check that out.
Thank you, Gina. We're going to get to Jeff's number and my tool of the week, but before we do, let's say hello to Tim O'Reilly of O'Reilly Media. Tim, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am.
Thank you so much. I know this is a hardship. You're in between flights, but such an important day, and I don't know if you've heard the news because you were on a plane. We just talked to Trevor Timm of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. 29 members of Congress today have retracted support for SOPA.
Yes, I did see that, and I was actually kind of interested to see that 26 of them were Republicans.
Yes.
Now, so that makes me wonder, where are the Democrats? And in particular, being from California, I wonder about Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein being on the wrong side of PIPA.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tim, you've written such great posts on Google Plus about these bills and about reframing the argument, which I think, as usual, you're really a deep thinker on this. I encourage people to read your posts. One of the issues being, of course, that intellectual property isn't really property in the same way that we understand, a car, a cell phone, or a house to be.
Well, I guess I don't even really want to go there. What I suggested in my post, there were 2 or 3 things. First of all, I totally agree with all the issues that have been raised about internet censorship and the dangers of going down that path. But I thought, well, there's a lot of people already talking about that. And what could I add to the discussion? And what I thought I could add was the perspective of a publisher for whom, piracy is really not that big a problem. I mean, we know that our books are pirated. They appear on torrents all the time. They're also, just by the way, the books that are most often stolen from libraries, according to librarians.
Interesting.
Does that mean
those
that
darn programmers, they're such thieves.
Does that mean that we don't want our books to be in libraries? No. Does it mean that we want to shut down libraries because they're, havens for shoplifting? The whole idea is, first of all, I wanted to bring that personal experience in there, but I also wanted to bring in a bit of historical perspective. I found, for example, in one of my posts, this wonderful letter from one of the Harper brothers back in the 1860s, where he was responding to complaints from author Anthony Trollope that Harper brothers had pirated his novel Orley Farm. And, Harper went on to basically say, look, we're doing the best we can. It wasn't an international copyright treaty, and so they would just go buy, what they called early sheets of various novels. And in this particular case, Trollope had sold them to Lippincott, which was in Philadelphia, rather than the Harper brothers. And they were like, well, we have a series of Trollope novels. You're interfering with our ability to do commerce. So they went and published a pirated edition. and you look at this and you go, American publishing began with piracy. And now these companies are complaining. But the fact is, new markets begin in a very chaotic and disorderly way. And it's really evidence of market failure. And so I wanted just to bring that historical perspective in and to say, yes, there are problems right now. But as a matter of industrial policy, do we as a nation want to say, let's try to stop the future until our old line companies can get their act together to serve the market in a way that satisfies it? Or do we want to just say, hey, the market is moving, get with the program? Now, I have been spending, I started publishing ebooks in 1987, and I, have been waiting for this moment. And piracy is the last thing that's a problem for publishers. The big problem is they've been so afraid of piracy is they haven't actually taken first mover advantage.
Right.
And they're going to hurt a hell of a lot more from Amazon stealing their authors than they are going to hurt from piracy. And so if they had been more proactive about embracing the market and finding ways to deliver to customers what they want, they'd be way better off. So it's just misdirected, energy to try to get Congress to impose laws because you haven't acted to serve customers.
Tim O'Reilly, I'll let you get your flight. Thank you so much. Read Tim on Google+. He's been using that lately. Of course, O'Reilly Media is also on the internet at O'Reilly.com. But the Google+.
Well, we're blacked out today, so you can probably read the stuff on Google+ more easily than you can on O'Reilly Radar. Tomorrow you can go to the O'Reilly Radar.
Tim, it's great to talk to you. Thank you so much for making some time with us. Thank you for being a great leader and an eloquent leader in this subject.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Tim O'Reilly from O'Reilly Media, O'Reilly.com. Yes, it's blacked out, but there's a lot of good information there and, of course, on his Google Plus account.
All right.
Thank you, Tim.
Bye-bye.
Take care. TNT coming up in a bit, but first, Jeff's number of the week.
Real quick, Facebook finally exceeds Orkut in Brazil. In December, it's 36.1 million members, beat Orkut's 34.4 million. So as Google becomes more social in one way, the other way kind of goes a little bit in the sunset.
My tool of the week is I just have fallen in love with Google Currents. Google Currents is a app for iPhone and Android phones that is a really great way, and tablets, I should mention. There's an iPad version. Great way to get news, both from your Google Reader account and other sources. This is, in some ways, the Flipboard for Android. Really a great way to read and consume content, and free. Currents is the name of it. You can find it in both the iOS and the Android marketplace, and for the iPad as well. If you haven't taken a look at it, I highly recommend you do. Some really nice features make it easy to read, easy to share, and very attractive. I have it. You know, the only request I'd have is, can you guys make an Android widget? I want a widget, please. No widget means no desktop space. I've got a page just waiting for you right there. Right there. I'll put it right there on my Google widget page. Currents. Thank you, Matt Cutts. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Thank you, Jeff Jarvis. Thank you, Gina Trapani. Thank you all for watching in black and white. The facts are black and white. They're simple. They're straightforward. Before this day is out, I hope you will all contact your member of Congress. Phone them. It's the best way to do it. If you want a phone number, go to blackout. It is blacklist. Blacklist.eff.org. They will help you find the phone number you need. And you can strike out against censorship of the internet and stop those internet blacklist bills. In fact, let's stop it so hard that they don't come back with another. What do you say? Let's hold the line. And thank you for joining us. We do this show every Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That would be 2100 UTC at twit.tv. You can always get the show audio and video available after the fact from twit.tv, or subscribe on iTunes or the Zune Marketplace, or anywhere podcasts are available. We do appreciate your subscription. It helps us count how many of you listen, and by doing so, we can make a little money so that we can keep doing this show. We thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week in color, in living color, on This Week in Google. Trevor Timm is an attorney with EFF.org. Is that, do you have a title, Trevor, or just attorney?
Actually, I'm an activist.
An activist?
Yes, although I am a lawyer, I'm not practicing. So I'm an activist and writer for EFF.
I love it. Welcome. EFF is the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We've spoken, of course, many times with many of its founders, including Mitch Kapor, John Perry Barlow. We've told you many times, support EFF. We do. We donate every month to EFF. And if you go to EFF.org right now, you can see a lot more about the Internet blacklist bills, SOPA and PIPA. And, of course, they put that big bar, Stop Censorship bar, across the top. So let's actually do a little news bit first, Trevor. How are these protests working? How widespread are they? Are they effective?
I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is probably the most effective online protest we've ever seen. We had major sites black out their websites in protest. Wikipedia, obviously, is the biggest. They're 6th largest site in the country. But we also had Craigslist, Huffington Post, Wired, EFF, a bunch of others. Reddit was the one that started this. And we've seen 29 congressmen change their position today already, and the day isn't even half over. So it's been basically an avalanche. Every 15 minutes, it seems, we're getting news that a new congressman has changed his mind, and a lot of them are co-sponsors too. So that's where it really hits home, is when the people who supported this bill from the beginning decide, you know what, we're going to start listening to our constituents and oppose this bill.
So, boy, that is a stunning number. What is it, 29 members of Congress?
29, that was of a half hour ago. At this point, it might be 30 or 31.
That's fantastic. And I think the key here, and I'm sure you would agree as an activist, is people, I think, sometimes feel like they cannot influence Congress. Well, there is no greater influence than your vote. So the key here is really being an activist, calling your member of Congress, giving them your name, the city you're from, make sure they understand you are a voter in their district, and being clear that this is your opinion, and it carries some weight.
Yeah, absolutely. We encourage everyone to call in. If they can hear your voice, it's even better than email. Obviously, emails are great. We have a petition for sending out emails. It's already gotten, since last night at midnight, it's gotten 250,000 emails sent to Congress. Apparently,
wow.
The Senate servers were knocked off for a little while today because their websites were overloaded. Their phones have been ringing off the hook. Google actually participated in the blackout too. They had their logo blacked out. You can still search, but and they asked people to take action. So far today, they've gotten 4 million signatures on their petition.
That's amazing. I think that that was job one, was to raise awareness, because unfortunately, technical issues like this do not capture the public interest. You know, Congress is embroiled in a debt crisis, in an economic crisis. All of the news channels, when they cover Congress, and I've been watching carefully over the last few days, cover that. They don't mention SOPA and PIPA. So it's up to us to spread the word to everybody, let them know, and then have them call Congress and put this on the front burner. And I have to say, we cannot count on mainstream media. I was just watching CNN, and who's on CNN to talk about this? Remember, CNN is owned by Time Warner. Warner Brothers Films, ring a bell, and the Motion Picture Association of America's head, former Senator Chris Dodd, is on, saying this is going to, piracy costs jobs in Hollywood. This is, we've got to pass this bill. And he's effectively calling this protest terrorism. So I think that it's very important that we treat this with the urgency that it requires. Can we declare victory, Trevor?
We lost his.
We
Skype,
lost him.
Yeah.
Ah, shoot.
We're trying to call him. We think Skype is taking a day off.
That's fine. Look at google.com. I've got it up on my site. It's that is great. And right there, tell Congress, please don't censor the web. The link on the front, and that's the petition. And they have 14 million signatures so far. I hope this gives people a feeling of power. I hope this tells people. Actually, 4 million, not 14 million signatures. I hope this tells people that we can make a difference. And I hope that people realize that this is not over. All this does is send the RIAA and the MPAA back into the trenches. They're going to figure out a way to do this more gradually, more secretively. Now you understand why the ACTA treaty was being pushed in secret. They know that people don't want this.
We got him back.
So,
yeah, I'm back now.
So my question to you, Trevor, was: can we declare victory today?
Oh no, definitely not. I mean, today has been great. The problem is that the Senate is still scheduled to vote on this bill, Protect IP, next week, and the House has indicated that they're going to continue marking up the bill in February. So the fight is far from over. We have to remember we started with the deck stacked against us because Hollywood had outspent the internet 13-1 in Congress. This bill was basically dropped on Congress's front doorstep by the music and movie industries. They wrote the whole thing with no input from these internet companies at all. And, when you hear this bill will stop online piracy and you don't really read into it, who's against that, right? The senators who originally signed on, and there was over 40 of them, which is almost unprecedented for co-sponsors, never really read through the bill. They didn't understand how much free speech it would censor and how many ordinary users who've never really thought about copyright infringement it would affect. So now that they're seeing this pushback, and it's honestly massive and unprecedented. I mean, 4 million signatures on a petition in less than a day is... I've never heard of that. They're starting to wake up and understand what they initially signed up for is not what they thought.
Well, Trevor, I know you've got a lot to do today, and there's a lot more to do. I encourage everybody to visit EFF.org and read up on the bills. I mean, it's more than just casting your vote or calling your member of Congress. You need to know, you need to understand why this is a bad idea so that you can argue effectively with friends and family who say, but piracy is a bad thing. We've got to stop piracy. They need to understand why this doesn't work. This is it's up to all of us as educated geeks to take action. Geeks tend to like to sit on our duffs and enjoy life and our gadgets. Well, we want to preserve what we enjoy, and this is time to act. EFF.org. Trevor, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And EFF.org/action is the action page on EFF. That's fantastic. Just really.
Yeah, or you can go to blacklist.eff.org as well.
Oh, I like that. All right. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Trevor Timm, an activist with the Electronic Frontier Foundation.